Hey, welcome, Talent Warriors, to episode 15 of the Talent War podcast. I'm your host, George Randle, and as we head into the close, from a talent perspective, what can be considered one of our most challenging years of 2020, from living in the pandemic to post-pandemic to vaccines to the Great Resignation, workplace flexibility in the office, work from home, work remote, work flex, back in the office, to probably the most lopsided candidate-friendly market that I've seen in over 2 decades of working with talent. And we've really been privileged to have some amazing guests. And what I thought as we would close out this year, was that we would just go back and pull some of the absolute best pieces of advice, the best quotes, the best segments from people I admire so deeply, to have Don Robertson, Tom Lokar, Melina Soto, Lisa Schreiber, Rich Davini, Brian Decker, Karen Clark on this podcast is, it's an honor. But when you're starting your own podcast and you're trying to help people get better at talent, all things related, truly getting a talent mindset, the people that we've had on this show this year, I don't know how we're going to top some of them, to be honest with you. One of the lessons that I learned a little bit later that I wish I would have is to make sure that I'm checking my ego in all that I do. And now that I'm well over 2 decades in the talent space, I think my learning has actually accelerated, and in large part due to the amazing guests we have. So I hope you stand by. We're going to queue up some of the best of 2020 in the Talent War podcast, things you can take notes on, things that you can put into action right away to make life better, easier, and your company more powerful and your people more impactful. So thank you for a great 2020 and listening. Send us your suggestions, but stand by for some of the absolute best leaders in the talent space. Hey, Talent Warriors. Something that we'd love to be able to do for you is to get you a free copy of the Talent War, How Special Operations and Great Organizations Win on Talent. And one of the ways that you can do that is just simply by leaving us a good review. And we're going to randomly pick a few and get copies out to those listeners. So thank you so much for listening. And I hope you do leave us a review, and I hope we can send you a copy of our book. All right, Talent Warriors, a way to get a free copy of the Talent War, How Special Operations and Great Organizations Win on Talent. Go to thetalentwargroup.com, get over to the Talent War podcast and scroll all the way down. And if you leave us a question that we select as a topic or for an episode, we're going to make sure that we get you a copy of our book. Appreciate you taking the time to listen. And please send us your questions. We'd love to hear what's on your mind, what's challenging you the most, and what we can challenge some of our top leaders with as far as questions. So we look forward to hearing from you. Hey, welcome, Talent Warriors, as we kick off the best of episode of the Talent War podcast. First up on the agenda, episode 1, is really a little bit of background. It's Tom Lokar and I chatting about how I came into recruiting at scale, and really mind-boggling scale, at Hewlett-Packard. But, in the 3 or 5 years when I headed up global recruiting, I think we hired 75,000 people.
I know that's true, and I know it sounds unbelievable to people, but at the time, HP was one company. It was over 350,000 people worldwide in every country of the globe. And I managed a portion of it that was somewhere between 45 and 55,000 people, depending on which portion, whether I had ITO or the apps BPO job, 10 to 17 billion in revenue. And I know, George, you hired that many because I know in my 5 years at HP, I probably let go through best shoring, which is the process of workforce planning your high cost people out of the US and Europe into lower cost Asia and South America. I probably best shored 25 to 30,000 jobs and rehired the same amount in other countries. And that was your staffing team that was doing it. And you weren't doing that just for me because you had moved up to the enterprise services role, the larger business unit that I was a part of. The scale at that time at an HP and an IBM is just so mind-boggling that people think we're bullshitting them. But that's what it was. You can look back at the statistics. But what a great learning experience to do HR at scale.
This clip that you're going to hear is from episode 2. Is Tom Lokar, Mr. PhD in all things talent, really talking about the best way to stem attrition is to really hire better. Because once you hire better, then the results, the fruits of your leadership are really going to make a difference.
Who are we selecting? How are we selecting them? What questions are we asking them to determine whether they're ready to stand in a hot kitchen or to work on a manufacturing floor or hospital? Try to gauge their level of vocation to the role and then have really fantastic targeted cultural onboarding and orientation, as well as job-specific orientation, mentoring, pairing them up with an employee who's been there a longer period and can navigate that first shift, those first few hours. I remember my son, who's now a shift manager at Chick-fil-A at age 17, so maybe he's a future CEO, George, I'll have to tell him that. I remember his first week, the things that he had to get used to customers saying who weren't getting what they wanted. And he started in the middle of the pandemic, right? So there's no dining inside. It's all delivery in the hot sun, here in the hot Texas sun, on a 9-hour shift. They didn't have the carryout window set up yet. The stuff that he had to just deal with, same with my son who works at Starbucks for the past 2 years, the stuff that they've had to deal with, the stuff they hear from people, it's abusive. And so helping them navigate through that is part of the retention process because you don't want to have to go back into this labor pool.
And this one's from episode 3. Really, as we kind of got into bad leaders, and I think all of us know that people don't leave.
They look behind them and there's no one there. They haven't mobilized a single soul toward any kind of strategy. They're all over the map. They're micromanaging and then they're unmanaging and they're distracted. And then they start interviewing after 9 months. And I quit, you're fired year after year for those folks.
Hey, you and I knew one of those. We will just affectionately refer to that person as Pumpkinhead. That was a person in the position of head of HR that, as I would say, I would follow, but only out of sheer curiosity to see what was going to happen next. And by the way, I want to make a point as we're describing this. I've been dying and I wanted to put it in our book, a statistic. I want you to guess at what the number is because I'm still searching for it. But how many CHROs, how many heads of HR cut their teeth and came up through the ranks of talent acquisition? Because I'm of the belief they just never come out of my function. Once I was in talent acquisition, it's kind of like, okay, once you get to VP, that's it. Doesn't matter how good a leader you are. If you didn't come out of L&D, if you didn't come out of comp and benefits, if you didn't come out of OD, you were at the pinnacle of your career once you made the VP of talent acquisition or whatever the head title was. But they just never come out of our function, and we're in the business of people. So that's my personal rant and complaint for the moment. This one's from episode 4. And it's just, Tom and I got into a great discussion about the challenges of working remote and really taking a look back at some of what we really enjoyed, which was breaking bread with a lot of our coworkers and many times in different countries that really had been restricted due to COVID, and how much we miss that and what a true benefit that is. There's some people that the employees are now kind of saying, hey, I don't want to come back. So what's an HR leader to do?
Yeah, and I think the big picture answer to that for me as a CHRO is, do we know what our productivity has been since we've been more work from home than work in the office? If that productivity has stayed the same or gone up, then, maybe you don't force the issue, but then think about the long-term impact of people working away from each other and what it means for your culture, what it means to be a company, and what does it mean for adding new employees? Because those employees have already worked for you. They've already been oriented. They've already been enculturated. And now you send them home for a year and they're working from their desktop and it's working fine. They're knowledge workers. My understanding from reading I did a quick scan of contact center businesses, call center businesses, and many of them are reporting productivity upticks via the throughput of work through their contact center, which is, as you know, with contact centers, they are highly automated, but they're highly metriced. Like we measure everything in a call and contact center. So they're noticing an uptick. And frankly, I'm not surprised because when I was at HP, I had the opportunity to go to Vegas to one of the big call center contact center conferences before the HP Discovery event. So the week before was they would overlap. And this was already happening. In fact, I ended up flying there with the CEO of a company. He was the CEO of this contact center company. He had 1,000 employees. They all worked from home.
Here we go from episode 5, certainly a service that we have been doing an awful lot of at the Talent War Group, and that's executive coaching. And Mr. Tom Lokar explains to us what an executive coach is and what it isn't. Hope you like.
To me, an executive coach is someone that can sit with a leader and talk them through the 360 of their leadership style, their personality, their approach, bring it into the context of their job, and then identify ways that that person can leverage their strengths within the job context, whether it's leading a team, leading a business unit, leading a company, their first management experience, and also help them take a look in the mirror, either through assessment tools or through the coaching process, which we'll talk about probably later in terms of how do you enter into a coaching scenario and how do you exit and what are some of the best practices that I like around that. But I think that coach is the person that can help you, the leader, look in the mirror and not necessarily, wrestle with strengths, because part of my interview process is, and I think a lot of people interview process is you ask a job candidate or you ask a coaching candidate, give me an idea what you think your strengths and weaknesses are. And a lot of people honestly are pretty good. With a little self-awareness, they can pretty much hone in, especially when they know they're sitting across from a coach who's a professional, either a psychologist or a well-seasoned executive coach. They're pretty honest about their strengths and weaknesses. And filling those gaps are important. But I find that the best coaches get their client to look beyond that and to get at those blind spots.
My evil twin, Karen Clark, who is now a CHRO of a 3,000 person company. And she walks us through kind of the false belief of that we can return to normal, helping our listeners understand that really what we're in is our new normal.
We've all got Facebook. We're all epidemiologists. We know exactly what the hell to do. And now you got to be running into the exact opposite now.
At times, yeah. So you have very, very differing opinions about, as I was saying, about what, the new normal will be and when it will be. And that I kind of giggle about because, again, we're not through this. We're getting through this at varying stages based on location, but we're not through this. If you're watching any bit of the news and what's going on, we've still got some strides to make. And I think the issue is when things start to normalize, leaders go back to their default, right? How I lead, what I've learned, what I know, this is what works. I've got to go back to what I know. And the issue with that is that's not necessarily going to align with the expectations of the workforce going forward. Our biggest struggle, and I'm sure most HR folks can empathize, is trying to help leaders understand that there are different ways and probably a transition time.
I love from episode 7, Brian Decker, Senior Director, Player Development at the Indianapolis Colts. And he just gives this great quote about winners and losers. And it's now etched in my brain. And I hope you have a chance to write it down and remember it.
I would start by saying, and I was talking to Coach yesterday, winners and losers aren't separated by their goals. They're not. All 32 teams want the same thing, right?
Yeah.
There is a really difficult balance that an organization has to maintain between building for the future while remaining competitive in the present. And I will be honest, my personal belief is that what really drives that is the mindset, the beliefs, the values that the head coach and GM have before they even get there. So I think Chris is like anybody else. He is as competitive as anybody. In fact, he's fiery competitive. He wants to win every game. Coach wants to win every game. Every coach wants to win every game. But we also have to balance that with future needs because we want to be able to sustain success. So to me, I think your vision sets you out, depending upon the organization and how far out your time is, but 3 to 5 years, maybe longer. You have to have this long-term vision, where you're wanting to go. But we have to make decisions in the present. And so to me, it's that balance of what we need today and what's better for tomorrow. And a lot of that goes into the decisions you make on your roster and ultimately who's filling those critical roles, both for their development and the performance of the team.
Episode 8, I had the distinct pleasure of having a fellow vet on as well, just like Brian. And some other guests that were coming up in later episodes, but Dan Bradley, just a hell of a leader. And we were talking about the difficulties of success in your transition, and some great advice comes out.
I'm completely okay if you disagree with me, but what did you find when it came to the leadership skills that you brought to the corporate world?
No, I totally agree with that. I will say there's an asterisk in that communicating those skills, communicating those processes is a lot tougher. Because, you have to remember when you have someone like leaving the military at age 25, they've probably been doing this since they were 18. This is really what they know. They've grown up with this. It's not just what they know, it's all they know. So these kinds of things really come second nature, especially when you're talking to guys who have come from working on the more elite teams and especially the small teams. These things are not nice to haves. These things are not, it's okay, we'll get you there, we'll teach it to you. They really can be the difference and have been the difference between who lives and who dies. So you don't get to slack on these leadership principles. Communicating that in an effective way in the military and communicating that in an effective way in private industry, two very different things. And the company that I came to, they really placed a huge emphasis on the leadership principles and they could state them.
Episode 9. Wow. I tell you, a lot of these, it's hard to pick and choose favorites, but two people that I really admire deeply, Melina Soto, Lisa Schreiber, came on the show. I don't know how we could narrow it down to one or two simple quotes, but this one, for all of our leaders, male and female, you got to give a listen.
You kind of have both said that. It's just, there shouldn't be a need for you to battle. And if you don't, I know the both of you have choices, guys. You're sought after all the time.
It's interesting. I just want to make one quick comment. It's interesting because there is an enormous conundrum, right? I love the fact that states have taken on to say you can't ask about historical. That's good because there's wage compression for women across the board. So if you ask about that, now you've created a really depressed baseline to manage that offer. Women, unfortunately, and we're changing it slowly but surely, need to really understand their value and not fear making the comment about what they believe they should be compensated at, right? And more, there's more data elements, and people kind of raise their eyebrow and say, that person was made what? Okay, well, I need to rethink about how I look at myself, right? But there's also a conundrum in the search process. I know they don't ask, but a lot of the search firms will quickly price you out of consideration.
Episode 10, Miss Lisa Jaster, Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Jaster, the third woman to ever complete Ranger School, the oldest female, and I think the only mom. But she gives us a little bit of background on where delete the adjective truly came from.
And I got to invite my friend Sue Fulton as my guest. So I was sitting, there's a box that the first lady has. So I was sitting with Michelle Obama. And then whoever we brought as our plus one got to sit somewhere, I think it was like West Wing, and watch the State of the Union from there. And it was a big deal, apparently, that instead of bringing my husband, I brought this activist. Sue's gay, and she's very, very active in Sparta. And I wish I could tell you her resume. It's insane, but she does a lot for underrepresented demographics. And somebody was talking about your lesbian friend or your gay friend. And I'm like, how about just my friend? Because she's more politically active than I am. She knew when to tell me to be quiet. Hey, have a glass of wine and walk around and relax. Okay, put that glass of wine down. You're too relaxed. She was the perfect +1, but she was a perfect +1 because she was Sue, not because she was my lesbian friend Sue. And so at some point in time, she was like, I just wish people would just delete the adjective. And when she said that, I'm like, I'm writing this down. And literally from that day on, I hashtag delete the adjective because she's a good friend. She's a good person. She isn't a good gay friend. She isn't a good gay person. She's just a friend. So delete the adjective. And that's kind of how it really evolved. So General Millie saying, be more public, put yourself out there. And then Sue saying, hey, there's qualities you have, and they don't necessarily anchor themselves in your adjectives.
Episode 11, Mr. Don Robertson. Whoever has the best talent, I don't even need to key up this segment. This is just one phenomenal leader. And I got to tell you, if you ever get a chance to work with or be around Mr. Don Robertson, by gosh, take it. Just a phenomenal leader and groomer of talent. Really the person who is going to invest more in you many times than you do yourself. Great example that he set for me as a leader in the human capital space.
Well, I mean, George, this goes without saying, whoever has the best talent is generally going to win. We are in a talent war. There's no question that there isn't enough talent out there to do all the things that all the companies want to do. And so what I would tell any company that is not emphasizing that enough is one of the most powerful things you can do is become a talent magnet. And it becomes momentum driven. So if you become a company that's known to develop and grow talent and to create opportunities for talent to develop and grow, you're going to attract more of them. And there's a number of issues out there that companies are facing. It's not just acquiring the right talent. It's also now you have to, the talent needs to be diverse. It needs to have the right skill sets. There's a number of factors that come into play. It's got to be in the right location. And of course, now that companies are allowing much more flexibility in remote capabilities, you're going to have a challenge that anyone, anywhere in the world can recruit your talent. So you can't just be thinking about it from an acquisition standpoint. You also have to be thinking about it from a development, from a growth, from a retention standpoint. And so therefore, things like enabling your employees to have a career, enabling your employees to achieve their lifetime dreams. So it isn't just a case where the company gets what it needs from the employee. The employee has to get what they need from the company in their own development as well. So there's really two sides of this coin.
And as we wrap up this Best of Talent War podcast, the last segment, working on a book with this gentleman. I'm one of a few authors, but a real gift to have the author of the attributes, 25 hidden drivers of performance, retired Navy SEAL Rich Davini. And one of the great things is when you do this podcast is really getting some actionable information out there for those people who are tuning in, which I'm so grateful for. But I got to tell you, as long as I've been in the talent game, the guests that we've had on this year really have helped me up my game. So I'm always learning, always listening, and to have Rich Davini on and to talk about the hidden drivers of performance. Absolutely. If you're in a position of hiring, any influence whatsoever on the hiring process, this is the one you have to listen to. And also pick up Rich's book, The Attributes, 25 Hidden Drivers of Performer. Must read, great information, enjoy.
But what we have to understand about that is that even though we were using that environment to tease out those attributes and see if they had the levels that we were looking for, those same levels of those attributes now apply to many different contexts in the job that we were conducting, right? So think about it. The fact that now I can perform in that environment at that level with that level of mental thinking, now I can also do the same thing if I'm 20,000 feet up in the middle of the night and my parachute malfunctions. I can apply that level of decision-making, rapid thinking, rapid situation. I can do the same thing if I'm diving in the pitch black ocean or in a harbor and something goes wrong, right? So these environments were telling us things about the candidates and ourselves, because we all went through the same selection, that applied across the contexts of our job. And this is the power of attributes. And this is what employers have to understand, is that if you understand the attributes you're looking for and the candidates you're looking for have those attributes, you can always train the skill. Okay, we always used to say, we can always train someone how to shoot. I mean, that's easy. Can we train someone to run into a room and within a millisecond decide who's bad, who's good, and make it and take a precise shot and then move on? That's attributes. That starts to involve patience, situation awareness, compartmentalization, courage, adaptability, things like that. So if you focus on these elemental things, you dive down into performance. What we started finding is, we could articulate it better, but we started finding the dark horses. In other words, the guys who didn't appear on the surface level to be very skilled.
And thank you for listening to the Talent War podcast, where we discuss all things talent, focusing on a true talent mindset, which is a core belief that the only true competitive advantage you can hope to achieve and maintain is your talent. Join us for the next episode of the Talent War podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you heard, subscribe, please leave a review, and connect with Dr. Tom Lokar and myself on Talent War Group's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram accounts, and send your comments and inquiries to media@Talent War Group. The Talent War podcast is brought to you by the Talent War Group, a management consulting and executive search firm. With services like talent acquisition, leadership development, seminars, and executive coaching, we will work with you to create talent solutions to your business problems. To get started, please visit us at www.talentwargroup.com.